Alright, welcome to Script Camp's TV Pilot Bootcamp Week 1. If you're just joining us, we've only had one previous class in this course series, which was the Week 0 class. Both of these are free and open to the public, and the Week 0 is a good place to go and get the kind of broad overview of everything that will be included in the class, and also to maybe get that early feedback on your loglines, even if you just have a basic idea for what the logline could be. So for next time, if you missed it, check the week before the course starts, and there will always be that kind of Week 0 prep class to give you a little extra head start. So here's the buttons that you need to press to speak aloud. It's the hand icon that says request to speak, and then once you are requested to speak, you'll have to click accept invite. If you're on a mobile device like a tablet or phone, you might have to turn the device to the side to see those buttons. So this is Script Camp. This was the first of our Skill Camp servers and is currently our biggest one with over 4,000 members. We're growing all the time and adding new sort of communities. We have many different class servers that offer free and low-cost classes to help you learn new skills and reach your life goals. Skill Camp is a non-profit company that started with Script Camp, but we've since added things like Word Camp for novel writing, Tune Camp for animation, Code Camp for coding, Lingo Camp for language learning, and many more. I've been writing full-length scripts for 11-12 years. Got signed for the first time in 2017 off of a feature script. Since then, the only credit that you guys might recognize would be Creepshow, which was a TV show anthology from 2019 that I wrote an episode of, placed in a few contests and fellowships that you can see here. I've had some features set up in production companies in town, and I teach the boot camps and weekly writers lab. We have multiple times a week for table reads, which is where you can submit your script to be read by the community and to get feedback from them. That's going to be Sunday at 2 p.m., so that's later today, 2 p.m. Pacific time, Tuesday at 11 a.m., and Saturday at 2 a.m. Pacific time, which is our international time slot, which should be more accessible to people around the world. We also, on WordCamp, which is our prose server, we have 2 times a week a reading and critique session as well. That's going to be Saturday 7 p.m. and Thursday at 10 a.m. So there's plenty of things going on every month with over 100 hours of events, classes, workshops, and other things on all of our different servers. You can see the upcoming bootcamp schedule here. This one today is going to be running Sundays 10 to noon for the next 6 weeks. So there's 5 classes after this, with the idea being that you finish your pilot by the end of the week that follows the final class. Feature Bootcamp started last week. It's not too late to join, but I would join by this upcoming class if you have not yet done so. I'd usually recommend joining before Class 2. That's running Fridays 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific time, and we have Novel Bootcamp running Saturdays 12 to 2. That one's half done. It's been going for a while. It's okay to join anytime, but it's unlikely you'll be able to catch up with the class that's been writing a book for 6 months or 6 weeks or more. But in any case, you don't have to follow along any particular benchmarks or milestones. You can work at your own pace, join those whenever you want, and that's running all the way through the end of January. We also have Weekly Writers Lab, which is like an office hours session that you can come in Saturday 4 to 6 p.m. at any point. You can bring up to 5 pages of anything you're working on in terms of screenplays, fiction, outlines. You can bring questions and topics that you'd just like to hear more about, and otherwise just bring anything you're working on for feedback, as long as it is doable within the 15 to 20 minutes sort of time. If you plan to join the TV Bootcamp, there's a poll in the chat, which you can see there. You can click the numbers. Number 1 means you plan to sign up. There's also numbers to click on that indicate you have questions or you aren't sure or anything else. So look in the chat there. If you plan to sign up, you can let us know and you'll get instant access to all of the member-exclusive chat channels. And if you're looking to sign up and would like to know where to go, you can head to scriptcamp.net. There you can sign up just right there off the main page for unlimited membership, which includes access to every single class, workshop, and event on every server, not just Script Camp, so you don't have to get the memberships separately or individually. You can just sign up for Script Camp, and that will give you access to Word Camp, Film Camp, Code Camp, Tune Camp, Creator Camp, Design Camp, Lingo Camp, and our new one, Game Camp, which we only have one recurring event on so far, but we're going to be adding more events, more meetups, and sessions on our game design-focused server too. Membership also includes access to the video library, which includes recordings of every previous class, huge discounts off consultations and proofreads, and you also get access to the member-exclusive chat channels and weekly Writers Lab and Advanced Lab sessions, which are just for our unlimited members. So definitely, if you're thinking about joining classes like this and you want to persist past just the opening free weeks, then you should sign up for unlimited You can sign up for yearly and save 40%. All right, so let's move on. We're going to look at the overview of this course, which is running until January 21st. So that gives us until the new year, and the Christmas holiday is going to kind of boost out the duration of this class a little bit. But last week we started with just very basics of premise and logline and looking ahead at what does TV writing look like in America? How do you get a job as a TV writer? What does this actually take and require? What does the career actually look like? And what are some of the basic elements of this that you're going to have to remember and work with? This week we're looking at story engines, so we'll be talking more about engines and what makes a TV show actually feel like it could generate stories for potentially years and years of content, which the story engine is that kind of amalgamation of several different elements that are going to sort of sum up to feeling like a show. Like it feels like it's going to be more than just a movie. It's going to be more than just 2 hours of content. It's either going to be a long story that will unfold one chapter at a time, or it's going to be a series of potentially unlimited stories that kind of reset to the status quo every week, and every week we might expect a new one-off self-contained story within that world. But those are basically your options in terms of continuity format, and your show story engine needs to make it clear that your show is either one or the other of those options. So this week we're looking at story engines and loglines again, so if you have early versions of your logline that you got feedback on last week, you can bring back the revisions today to get that second pass. If this is your first time joining, then you can also get feedback on your logline, and I would expect, in most cases, we run the first hour as lecture and setup and prep, and the second hour is mostly dedicated to giving feedback on loglines. So don't just drop your logline in the chat at any point, because it will get lost in the text. It will be better if you wait until about the halfway mark, and then I will ask for, okay, now everyone share your loglines, and I will go through them in order and try to get through as many as I can. It's not 100% guaranteed to get through every single one, so if you're a little slow on the quick draw in that case, then you might want to bring the logline to lab instead, where you can always bring whatever you want for feedback, or you can post it on one of our many feedbacks chat channels this week and get that feedback from the community. But in any case, today is a good time to just sort of check in on the essentials of your idea, see, does this feel like it could work as a TV show? And beyond that, we won't spend way too long on recapping all the different elements of TV writing and stuff like we did last week. I'd rather spend today more on the craft elements of what makes a really good story engine, what is a story engine, and how does that kind of work, and then giving additional feedback and refinement to the loglines that you may be adjusting more as of last week, or maybe you scrapped the one you had last week and you have an entirely new one. Whatever you want to do, today is the day to get that feedback and to try, if by any way you can, by hook or by crook, if you can, to finalize that logline by the end of this weekend. If not, then as soon as you can in the next couple days, because pretty soon you have to just start outlining. And it's okay if you adjust your logline as you go, or if you need to change it at the end or anything else, but it's helpful to have that really strong guiding sentence that will help act as the North Star to keep you oriented properly and prevent you from drifting too far from your original ideas. So next week is outlining 1. We're breaking the story. We are writing up story beats, which is a general list of every major scene in your script. Next week after that, week 3, December 10th, we're doing scene cards. So you're expanding the story beats into a full paragraph for every single scene, along with a title for that scene and a page number that scene is going to take place on. So we're kind of estimating how long each scene will take and how many pages it will require, with an eye towards building our sense of pacing for the show. And as we're working through using that outline to work from, we're going to be able to assess accurately, am I taking too long on any one part, or am I rushing through the story beats? So the ascribing page numbers to each section, or to each scene card, is a form of almost hyper preparation, you might say, or you might see it that way. But to me, it makes it really easy to keep a close eye on your pacing as you're working through the episode, so it's worth doing, and it doesn't take that much more work at the beginning. But you notice that we do spend 3 weeks on prepping and figuring out what happens in the story. So if you figure out what the show is from a very zoomed out perspective, then you sort of zero in on what would just this pilot logline, just this first story be. And then we're going to spend the first half of the course just figuring out what happens in every scene, and then what happens on every single page. So by the time you start, you'll never be lost, because you know what happens on every page of the story, and you have this really clear and concise roadmap that should lead you all the way through from beginning to end. And if you're writing half hour, that's only going to require you to write about 2 pages a day on just weekdays once we start the actual writing. On December 17th, that's when you will start the script, and that's going to be, from then on, an act a week. So first act, week 4, second act, week 5, third act, week 6. So that is going to conclude January 21st. You notice that the holidays are in the middle there, so we do have that Christmas week off. But in any case, that will give you extra time. So you have that extra buffer. This will give you, probably around 8 weeks total, maybe even 9 if we count week 0, to write and finish your TV script all the way to the end, which is plenty of time. If you still need to enroll, make sure you do sign up before next class. You can do that at scriptcamp.net. If you just want to stick around for today's intro class, then you do not need to sign up for that. Alright, that's the overview of everything coming up. Let's jump right into ground rules and looking at the kind of table of contents for today's class. So we'll start with just a little info on types of ideas to choose and recapping some of the essential suggestions at the very beginning of the process before we move into loglines and story engines. So story engine is not one sort of field that you fill out. It's not one single sentence. A logline is simple because it's one sentence, right? A story engine is kind of an amorphous conglomeration of different elements. It's like a combination of everything that goes into your show that make it feel like this could run for years of interesting stories. So we will look at some of the individual aspects of story engine today. We'll talk quick recap on time slot format and genre and continuity, which we went over last week. So by now, assuming you were in last class, you should have a pretty clear idea of what the difference between a premise versus status quo show is, what the different time slot options are, and what the different page counts that you're going for are going to be, but we will just very briefly touch on those again today. We will look more at filling out sketchbook, which is going to be your goal for next week, is to completely fill out as much as you can the rest of your sketchbook for the project. And then second hour, we will be doing pretty much all loglines. So I would be working on your logline during this first hour of class. I would have your sketchbook open in another tab or on your screen and just be writing down questions that you have or things that you're unsure about, adding ideas or images or links to articles or any research information that you might need. And otherwise, just instead of, playing Candy Crush on your phone, you just have the sketchbook open and be adding to it actively, working on it throughout the class, even as you're just listening to the rest. We have a chat from Sinzanol, or a comment from Sinzanol on YouTube saying, will my comments be seen inside of YouTube chat? Yeah, they'll show up on the YouTube live, and they will also be visible to us here on Discord. So if you're watching from one of our different platforms like YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, you can hang out there, and your comments should be visible to us, though they sometimes take an extra minute or two for us to see. Or you can come join us on Discord, which you can find the link by just going to scriptcamp.net. And then you can actually participate in the class, ask questions, bring your loglines, and other things like this. But no matter where you're watching it, this is free and public and will be available to watch back after the fact. So YouTube is the easiest place to do that. So just go to our YouTube page, click on the list of previous live events, and you should find all of our other free live classes. Okay, so at that second half of the class, at the halfway mark, we will post and share loglines, but I would not post and share it until then, because otherwise they will kind of get lost. Because we have so much to do today, and we already kind of did a couple check-ins with folks last week on just the essentials of your goals. Feel free to weigh in the text chat if you want to, but I'm not going to take raised hands on this at the moment. Maybe tell us about yourself. What are you hoping to write? What are your goals? How many pilots have you read before, or what are your favorite ones? Maybe you have a favorite TV writer or favorite genre, something that you're trying to write something sort of like. Maybe that's the case, or maybe this is your first time ever, you have no experience, and you can let us know that too. Feel free to type in the chat and introduce yourself if you've not already done so, and I can read out a couple comments. I'm going to give you guys just a second to do that as I go grab my laptop's power cord to plug it in. I will be right back. If no one has posted, then feel free in the next couple minutes to continue to add those in the chat, and I will read them out as they come up. All right, I am back. Looks like a few people are typing, so you guys can finish your introductions in the chat as you wish. I'm going to so everyone who's typing, feel free to finish your comment. I'm just going to tell everyone else what to do next. So the next thing we're going to do is make your sketchbook. So if you've not already done this, you will just go to Google Docs and make a blank document. There's really nothing fancy or special or complicated about this. You will make a blank document, and at the top, you'll just make a couple fields for these questions that we have, or these things that we're going to try to make decisions on today, if possible. If not, then in this upcoming week. We have title, genre, format/time slot, comps, series logline, and pilot logline. I will leave this up so you guys can write all these things down. Nacho has also shared in the chat, thank you Nacho, a curated list of pilot scripts in our various different genre libraries. So you can see, you can search through this directory for scripts to read, and then there's also a great TV writing site. There's a Google group for TV writing, which has a ton of pilots posted on it, where you can find plenty of scripts to read. So I'm going to post that in the chat as well. All right, let's see what the comments that we've received in the chat are. Some introductions. We hear from Vicky. Vicky says, my goals for the moment is being able to create an animation project that I can do on my own. Okay, cool. Yep, so obviously you're going to find more resources for that for animation on Tooncamp, but in terms of writing the story for the animation, this was a fine place to start, especially if you're looking into writing sort of webisodes or episodic content like 10-minute web shorts or something like that. A lot of the basic elements of TV writing will apply to that. Thank you, Vicky. Ginger says, I'm trying to complete my very first screenplay and learn as much as I can along the way. I'm transitioning from writing novels, so it's been a big learning curve. Yes, absolutely. A lot of differences between these different formats. I did the opposite myself. I approached writing novels coming from the background of screenwriting for movies and TV, so I had to make the opposite journey and learn all those same quirks myself. But glad to have you with us, and yeah, some of the skills you build in one type of writing will definitely carry over or help in other aspects. Michael says, haven't read as many pilots as I should have now that I think about it, but Breaking Bad has been a favorite to read. That's great. Yep, classic, great pilot to read. Plenty of other options. I recommend reading 3 scripts a week. Eden is saying the stream died. I don't think the stream has died. If somebody else can confirm. Nacho, go ahead. Are you there, Nacho? So we were not getting audio from him. Maybe his mic came unplugged or something like that. Can anyone else tell me? Is the stream still going?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's just on Eden's end, I think. So maybe if Eden tries to disconnect and reconnect, hopefully you can see it. The stream is visible, I think, for everyone else.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Nacho. All right, let's see what else. Aniket says, I'm from India. I've written 1 bad feature script before this. Goals are to complete a pilot episode. Great. Yep, you got to get the bad ones out of the way, out of the system before you can get to the good ones. So it's totally fine to write bad scripts. It's kind of your job to write bad scripts for a while. So now, next goal, write a bad pilot. And then another one, and then another one, and then eventually you'll get to the good ones. Ginger says, I'm currently reading House of the Dragon pilot and been enjoying it a lot. Great, awesome. And Lech Luger says, I've been reading Westworld, some more HBO fans in here, to get more familiar with TV format. Yeah, that show, very, very complicated, a lot going on in that show. So it's worth reading of a wide variety of both, shows that are in different genres or have different size of cast, different size of ensemble, reading some shows that are very small and quiet and personal, and reading some shows that are, wall-to-wall dialogue and things like this. It's good to have a very broad range of scripts that you read. And my suggestion is, again, 3 scripts a week. We will ask in every TV bootcamp, what pilots have you read this week? So will always be a question no matter where we are. So you must keep the reading up, be consistent, take notes, pay attention, that you can't fall behind on the reading, especially if you've not really read pilots before. You're not going to write a good pilot unless you've read a lot of good pilots, so you must start the reading. Luke says, I'm not sure how to introduce myself. I'll go with Art Weirdo. Okay, too many favorite writers to mention. He likes Vince Gilligan, Alex Garland. His primary goal is to get to the chapter 21 of his novel draft by January 16th. Okay, great. So yeah, focused on a novel project instead of a TV project for now, but you can always drop by the other classes if you want. We have another comment. I'm coming from the world of skit writing, so this is all new to me, but this sounds like a lot of fun. Great, yeah. So skit is just a really, really, really short film, right? Like a 3-minute long sketch. There's going to be, if you're writing comedy pilots or things like that, then the ability to write really good sketches will carry over. Improv and stand-up and these other skills will always contribute to your ability to write funny lines in any comedy writing. So a lot of crossover there for sure. And Luke tells us that his least favorite pilot is by a writer he otherwise enjoys, Linwood Boomer's Americanized Red Dwarf pilot. Okay, well, sure, if you've got a least favorite, that at least tells us that you're reading a lot. So that's a good sign. Red Dwarf being a very famous English show. These American remakes that were all the rage in the early 2000s, not always big hits. All right, so make sure to fill out or write down all these things at the top of your sketchbook. Title, genre, format / time slot, comps, series logline, and pilot logline. And as you assess the answers or you decide the answers or whatever it is, try to fill out those fields today. So once you think of a title, you fill in the title. Once you can figure out what genre you're writing, you fill that out, etc. So we're going to be writing a pilot in 6 weeks. Is the draft going to be good? No. Don't expect it to be good, and don't require it to be good for you to be satisfied and happy with it, because your first ever painting is not usually going to get hung in the museum, right? So your first pilot is not going to go to TV. Just like this is a proposition to create a large company that will move millions and millions of dollars and employ hundreds of people over the course of years. It's very unlikely that your first ever script will be out of the gate ready to be made into a $100 million TV show, right? Like that's saying, I'm ready to be a CEO on day one. So just try to be realistic about your approach to this and about how wide the skill gap actually is, and keep in mind that it takes longer and is harder to do this than it is to become a professional athlete in terms of NBA, NFL, something like that. So you have to really commit to the long haul for this. It is not something you can casually or easily break into. It takes years and a lot of hard work and a lot of networking, and it is not for everyone. And if those things sound annoying or hard or difficult to you, this is definitely not for you. And this is a very, very social form of writing beyond all else. So keep in mind that you're not only working on these skills of how do I write a great story, but also these skills of like, how do I work with others better? How do I take and give feedback and things like this, which would just make you better in a room. So I would just look at stuff like this program and others on Script Camp or the other events and workshops and activities we have on trying to become a TV writer. You're not trying to have written one thing that's going to become an amazing multi-million-dollar show, especially if it's within your first, 20 scripts or whatever. It's probably not going to sell and make you a lot of money or get you a career. So you have to accept and understand that each of these are going to be certain learning steps in a long journey that takes many years. So try to get used to that. Try to use these as an opportunity to work on these skills and to actually become a writer. Don't worry about someone who has written one good thing. Let's look at basic ground rules and suggestions of ideas to pick. So don't do true stories, anthologies, or adaptations. Nothing that's going to require a large amount of extra research that's going to slow you down and make it more difficult to write a script in 6 weeks, which is hard enough as it is. Don't write time travel. Just believe me, just don't. We've never once seen a student successfully complete a time travel script in 2 years of running boot camps. Just don't do time travel. Don't do it. We have this guideline of probably don't do a historical. It's rare that somebody is actually able to finish a historical if you consider that it takes extra research and work and time to do. So if you have some kind of background in that history, or that period, it might be easier for you, but in any case, it's recommended that you not. Beware of things that just make a script difficult to read or figure out on the page. Anything involving things like multiverses, clones, complicated intertwined flashback structures, so different timelines, anything like that where it just becomes unclear who the characters are and what is going on. Those are kind of really advanced skills to learn, and I would not recommend writing them for a boot camp simply because you don't want the majority of feedback you get to be asking, like, wait, what happened? Wait, who is that? Wait, that's the same guy? I thought those were different guys. You're saying that's the same guy? I totally misunderstood the entire story. Like, you just don't want the audience to get hung up on the basic technical details of the time travel or the cloning devices or whatever it is that is going on in your script. So just be really careful about ideas like that, especially if you're just starting out. But in any case, take the time to take a big swing. Write something weird or interesting that you've never seen before. Just write whatever you think would be some weird mashup of genres that you like, that you think would be cool and would keep you excited and engaged and interested to write for 6 to 8 weeks. That's the main goal, is to finish, to get to the end, to keep yourself motivated and interested and excited enough to finish the script within 8 weeks. And really also get used to sharing work with me and your other fellow peers and everyone, even at the early stages. It can be difficult to hear big notes at early stages, especially if you're like, this is my masterpiece, I can't share any of this or else people are going to steal it, or people are going to copy my ideas, or they're going to make fun of it and then I won't like it anymore, or things like that. If you're working in TV staffs, remember how essential it is to share ideas even at the early stages. That's called just pitching ideas, right? And sometimes writers even have this thing they do where they're like, okay, bad pitch, it's going to be like this, right? So they start with an intention, they kind of set you up to understand that they're going to give you a bad version of the idea to begin with the expectation that the room will then collaborate to make that idea better in whatever way. But you can't be too attached to ideas to write in TV, you can't be too precious about them, and you can't be a control freak, considering this is an intensely collaborative and social medium where no matter who you are, at any level you have bosses. Unless you're paying for the entire TV show yourself and you own the network and the studio or something like that. Maybe then you don't have bosses. But most of the time you have bosses and coworkers and a chain of command and a hierarchy and a structure, and you have to fit into that well and not stick out and not be the squeaky wheel and not annoy people or smell weird or look weird and throw everyone off, you know. So you kind of have to get used to spending long amounts of time in the room writing with other people and being pleasant to be around and easy to work with. These are more important things to be working on than, say, I need to write the next Game of Thrones that's going to make $100 million. So that's just some tips for you. Don't go in expecting your idea to blow everyone's mind. It takes a long time to get good at this, and this is hard work, and it requires a big investment of your life to have a career doing this. Okay, that aside, let's look at the 5 major steps that we go from idea to first draft. We start with logline, we move up into sketchbook, and usually I make the sketchbook first and then work on the logline in the sketchbook, so technically I guess you could say sketchbook maybe comes first, but in any case, logline, sketchbook, which is going to be your unsorted list of ideas, influences, inspirations, research, snippets of dialogue or ideas for characters, character profiles or a cast list, ideas for scenes or locations, rules of the world that you're building out, or anything else. So just your sketchbook is to collect all of the ideas for this one project in one document. There are no real other rules of things you have to include besides just these basic questions: title, genre, format, comps, and the loglines. After that, the only other ground rule is, after today's class, if you're continuing with the program, we ask that you not use a screen name and instead change to using your real name, just like we have to do in the industry. You're using your real name. You don't have to do that now. That's just something for next week, or if you're coming back for more classes, you can right-click on your name and click Change Nickname, or I can do it for you if needed. But in any case, if you're serious about being a boot camper, you'll use a real name, or at least a nickname or middle name or something like that is an actual name. We don't like to be calling people, Fortnite player 420 in the boot camps. Okay, so we start with logline, we go to sketchbook, we go to story beats, which are it's kind of like the list of events in the episode, in the rough order that they're supposed to go in, but there can be some placeholders, there can be scenes missing, it doesn't have to be entirely complete. The scene cards, which are the next week, that's week 3, we're going to expand those story beats to add more detail to them so you're really sure what happens in every single scene. You're going to fill in all those placeholders and gaps and where a scene is missing. You're also going to make those decisions as to how many pages each scene is going to require. Therefore, you're going to be able to build out a really comprehensive picture of what's happening on every single page of your either 30-page or 60-page pilot. So, I think that before I get too into loglines, I do want to start with story engine. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll give the format for the logline and then go into story engine, so you guys have that to kind of copy down on your own paper if you want to, and you can then be working on that as we're continuing the discussion. So I'm just going to leave you with this for now. This is the Pilot logline template. You don't have to use exactly this every single time, but these are kind of like the basic questions that you need to try to answer in the logline and that people are going to be wondering about the script, right? So you can think of it going a little something like this. When or after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. It might be a little bit more like or else stakes, or until stakes, or it might be any number of variations on this, right? You don't have to use exactly this. But if you don't know what else to do and you're not sure where to start, then you should start with this, because this is going to force you to do a couple things. One, decide what event is actually kicking off the story. That's sometimes known as the catalyst or the inciting incident interchangeably, so that's the same story beat we're talking about. An adjective protagonist tells us who your main character is in terms of what specific tactic do they use, or maybe what limitation are they facing, or maybe what trait do they have that makes them the right person to go through this story. So you have to choose the adjective kind of carefully. Don't just pick the first thing that comes to your mind. And also the way that you describe the character should also be make them feel like they are the right person for this story. So people are a lot of things, right? A character might be a determined cop, but also a neglectful parent, right? Like we could describe the same character as both of those things, depending what the story requires or what aspect of that character is going to be challenged in that story. We might want to pick one or the other, right? So you have to kind of choose your adjective and noun to make them feel like they click within this story and like it is a cohesive idea. What else? So yeah, I'm going to leave that up just for another second so you guys can write that down if you need to, if you're not sure what the pilot logline looks like or what to be kind of working on as I continue to talk about engines and things like this. But write this down now. Remember this. Burn this into your brain. When or after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. The series logline can be a little bit more abstract, a little bit longer term, and is going to be giving us like the types of situations that are going to be coming up throughout the entire show. So if you only want to work on one today, I would recommend the pilot over the series. But in any case, your goal is ultimately to have both of these. So try to fill out both of them if you can. I'm going to go more into story engine before I get more into series loglines, because series loglines need to really clarify and amplify the story engine and make it very clear how this is going to be a show, more than how is this going to be just one single movie, right? Okay, so I'm going to go into story engine before we touch on series logline. So what is a story engine? It's a combination of several elements that sum up to create the conflict in your show that will sustain an entire theoretical series that, again, you won't probably get, so don't worry too much about it being perfect, right? 99.9% of pilots are not going to become multi-million-dollar productions, so don't go in thinking, okay, but maybe mine. But you have to always be sort of in this theoretical mode, right, where these pilots are a representative sample of something that doesn't exist and won't probably exist, but feels like it could support a show. So the story engine should be clear from the series logline alone, but if not the series logline alone, then at least looking at both of the loglines together. It's going to be fusing your character, story world, and situation all together to continually generate conflict. A strong story engine is going to suggest, potentially, 100 hours of television, or at least within the scope of what you're trying to do, right? Like, if your whole show is going to take place within 5 years, we might kind of imagine that's going to be a 5-year TV show, like where every season of real life, or every season that we run in real life, more or less corresponds to a year in the show. Maybe that is kind of how you are planning it, in which case your story engine should include that sense of where the walls, limitations, or otherwise the finish line of the story will be. If there isn't one, and remember, there does not need to be a finish line to a TV show. It could just sort of be like, here's the setup, here's the situation, this feels like it could go on forever. That's fine, but then in that case, you need to adequately explain what types of situations and conflicts the characters will be running into, and how the dynamic between them is going to dramatically sustain a very long narrative. So let's look at a description of the story engine for The Office. So again, since the story engine is not one concrete thing, it's not just like the story engine is this one sentence, right? It's a combination of different things, and different people might view them in slightly different ways. But this is my interpretation of what is the story engine for The Office, which is, I think, one of the most popular shows of all time, I would guess. And so I think that a lot of people will know the essentials of who these characters are, right? So let's start with the protagonist. The protagonist being the sort of centerpiece character of the show. TV is not as strong on a singular protagonist as features are. But a lot of shows, regardless, are still going to have one or two people at the heart of most of the conflict, right? Even shows that have a big cast are going to very often, except in the rare examples of true ensembles, which would be something like This Is Us, or there's certain other formats of, particularly like Korean dramas, for instance, sometimes have a really big cast with honestly equally weighted, no central one character, right? Those are very, 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 very difficult to pull off. So I would not lean on that. Oh, I guess I'm just writing an ensemble show just because you aren't clear on who your protagonist is. More likely than not, you just have not sharply enough defined who your protagonist is. It is most likely not an ensemble show. But regardless of that, let's look at The Office. Michael is our kind of flawed protagonist for the show. In some cases, he acts a little bit sort of, quote, villainously in that he acts very selfishly a lot of the time, but his actions and reactions are most often causing the heart of the conflict in each episode. He has a persistent goal as well, which is useful for a story engine, that it's even if it's just like saying the character is always doing different stuff, but all of it is basically in service of what? Making money, having a successful business, finding love, something like that, right? Having one kind of clearer goal, even if it is a little bit more abstracted, or even if it's not very tangible or concrete and would take many years to ultimately get through, like the story engine should still make very apparent, or it should still be very apparent in your show to have a clear story engine, what your character is just repeatedly trying to do, right? If every episode is just sort of like, well, they just, I don't know, do stuff, then it's tricky to make a story engine like that very apparent. You will then have to lean very heavily on the characters and their dynamics in that case. So having a persistent goal, if that is something that your characters are trying to do, like in The Office, they're always trying to make the office run smoothly and get more clients and keep the business running and expanding, basically. But, ... the but is always a good important part of the story engine, right? But his incompetence, awkwardness, and desperate need for approval cause problems that need to be solved. So, for instance, an average episode of The Office is going to be something like the Office, Michael makes too many weird "that's what she said" jokes, and as a result, The Office calls a harassment training seminar, right? That now the characters have to sort of suffer through this really awkward and embarrassing seminar where they learn how to talk to coworkers. And ultimately that is kicked off by Michael's decision, or Michael's choices and actions to be weird and creepy and awkward, right? So you can look at these character traits as really essential parts of the story engine. His incompetence, awkwardness, and desperate need for approval are going to be at the heart of a lot of the problems that come up in the show. The main character is really important in illustrating the story engine. Next we have Jim and Pam. They're sort of they are the more relatable characters. Their sort of slow-moving office romance takes center stage in a lot of the show's big arcs, and in terms of a sense of progress, sitcoms, most of the time, will use the development of relationships as their primary indicator of that progress, or the primary markers of that progress will be advancement in the steps of those relationships. I think it's just very easy to have plot lines that resolve on a one-per-episode basis, but then we're watching for the characters. Like, think of your big sitcoms. Most of the time, people are really, really getting invested in and rooting for the relationships between the characters. So that is going to be one of the main draws and one of the main gears in the story engine, right? So Jim and Pam's romance, episodes sort of alternate between Michael and Jim playing the lead in the kind of A story of the episode, with exceptions throughout in later seasons, but for the most part, it's either going to be Jim or Michael as the kind of main character of the episode, right? Most of the time it's Michael. Sometimes it can be portrayed as Jim. In any case, Jim and Pam are a really key aspect of the story engine too, because they work for Michael, they are his employees, so they are forced to interact with him, and are forced again and again to come up against his flaws, which are causing these problems, right? The incompetence, the awkwardness, the need for approval. So just within this setup, we can see how they're trapped in the situation together. They want to, if it feels like the characters could or should just leave, then the story engine starts to suffer or sputter a little bit, right? It might be like, if your characters move into a haunted house and it's a whole show about living in a haunted house, you're going to have a really good reason why your characters can't just leave the haunted house, or else we're going to say, oh, well, why is this going to last beyond the pilot? So the pilot needs to make it clear how this is a show. And then last we have Dwight, who's the antagonist sort of role a lot of the time. He's the lackey to Michael, so also has a connection and specific relationship to Michael, where he's trying to impress him and get more favor from him, as opposed to Jim, whom he's very competitive with. He's always competing with Jim and engaging in prank wars with Jim and things like this in an effort to get ahead, to be the favorite, to be the teacher's pet, and ultimately, because we get the feeling he wants to rise through the ranks and eventually be in charge at the company as well. So there's our 4 main characters of The Office, and just within these dynamics, you can think of any number of pairings of these characters. We could do a Michael and Pam episode, a Jim and Dwight episode. You could do a Michael and Dwight episode, a Jim and Pam episode. You can, find the little diagram that you could combine all these characters in different ways and get lots of unique combinations. And within that, we can always imagine the characters have a persistent goal, which is keep the business running smoothly and resolve conflicts at that business. We have an aspect or element that is causing problems or conflict between them, which is Michael's unfortunate personality traits as the main heart of it. Sometimes also other antagonistic characters like Dwight are going to fuel that conflict with their very quirky, unique, annoying personalities as well. And then our sort of everyman hero, Jim, is going to be the one that the audience is usually going to be following around and most invested in, and also it's going to fall upon him to solve the problems at the office. Very rarely is Dwight going to be the one to sort of save the day, right? So this is going to be like Jim and Pam putting out fires caused by Michael. That's kind of the show. And I know there's many other aspects to it, too. There's plenty of other characters. There's at least a dozen other main characters in the show, with lots of side characters, too. Lots of different types of plots and conflicts that come up on an episode-by-episode basis. But at the heart of it, at the very core of what makes the show tick, is Michael's the boss. He does weird, awkward, and uncomfortable things that cause problems that need to be solved, largely by Jim and Pam. That's the show. So I hope that's clear. That's how story engines kind of work, right? It's not just one thing. It's a combination of different things that ultimately go on to feel like they could support many years of narrative using this same setup. If it feels like your show's going to be changing premises every episode, then the story engine might not feel very clear at all. It might be incredibly murky. And if the story feels like it could easily resolve within 2 hours, then the story engine's going to be absolutely invisible as well. Ravenstar says, good idea to focus on the heart of the show for the pilot with the story engine. Yeah, exactly. So the pilot should make it very clear how the rest of the show is going to work. The pilot is like an advertisement for the rest of the show. It's what you have to get everyone to invest in and to buy into if they want to make the rest of the show. So it's what people are going to use to judge if they want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially, of their company's money on making the rest of the thing. So the pilot has to be really, really exemplary, standout example of amazing writing, and on top of that, it feels like it's the first sample of what ultimately would be an engaging, successful show with a strong story engine powering it. I want to stop and take any questions on story engines before we proceed. Everybody feel like they have a good sense of what this means and how to kind of think of or balance these things? Any ideas, thoughts, or questions on story engines? Looks like we have a few folks typing, so I'll let you guys finish your questions there. Hopefully everyone else is still working on your loglines in your other tab, filling out the answers to those questions and those things that we put at the top of your sketchbook, like title, genre, comps, format. Here's a question from Michael. What about a show like Breaking Bad where the story engine is starting to fall into place as opposed to The Office where everyone's already hired? So a show like Breaking Bad, the story engine clicks into place by the middle of the pilot. So Walt and Jesse have teamed up to make meth together, and then they're actually doing that in the pilot. A lot of people who are breaking into TV writing when they're first getting started, I'll say amateur scripts or whatever, not in a judgmental way, but a lot of amateur scripts will be, for instance, they'd be like, no, Walt and Jesse will meet halfway through season 1. Episode 1 is all just about Walt teaching at high school. And then in episode 3, maybe conceivably he would find out he has cancer. Then episode 5, he hears about Jesse. Then episode 8, he meets Jesse. When that's really not the best way to do it, you need to make the first episode a clear representative sample of what the show will be. So if there's a sort of central team up or central aspects or things that people that need to meet or things that need to kick into gear in order to illustrate what the show is at its core, that needs to happen by halfway through the pilot in most cases. If everyone's already sort of hired and we're just being dropped into the middle of a world we're facing a different situation of the week every time, then it's kind of like movie rules apply, right? We have the normal worlds, so we have the sort of before the inciting incident with the first act until the catalyst happens, which is going to shake up that status quo. It might upset the normal world and threaten to change it, and your characters are trying to get things back to normal. Or it might be an opportunity for things to change that your characters try. Like, think of an episode of Gilligan's Island, right? It's going to be like, hey, we saw a ship in the distance. That's the catalyst. And now the episode is going to be about, we have to make a big smoke signal to signal this ship, right? So the catalyst is usually going to be something that threatens to change the status quo in a good or bad way for your hero, and they're going to be either attempting to fix things and return them to normal, or they're going to be attempting to change their life in the way that opportunity provides for them. Luke asks, what's the most important part of the story engine to include in the logline? So, of all the different parts of the story engines, the characters are really at the heart of this. So pick an adjective, a careful, clear adjective to describe your main character, and then you might want to mention another character too in the logline. If you're just mentioning one single character and it doesn't become clear how anyone else is involved in the story, then something might be a little off in terms of story engine. Think of if your show is about, I don't know, a hitman, right? And you're like, a hitman does various jobs, and that's the series logline for your show. It doesn't really feel like a strong story engine because your character is not connected to anyone. There's no one to contrast them to. If it's more like a hitman tries to live a normal life in the upscale suburbs of Detroit, now I start to see the story engine because I see different aspects of his life, or something that he has to balance that side of his life with, right? The relationships with these other characters are going to hinder and hamper his ability to be a hitman, and the fact that he's a hitman is going to hinder and hamper his ability to be a family man, right? So the most important aspect of the story engine to highlight in the logline is going to be the dynamic between the characters, and if your show focuses really strongly on just one person, then bring to the surface more than anything else how your character's own traits are going to sort of be their own worst enemy, right? Someone like Don Draper, someone like that, for instance, you might want to clarify how these three personality traits are always the thing that are causing trouble and are creating the conflicts in the episodes. But chances are you have to mention at least one other person. Any other questions on story engines? Luke says he's going to try a radical rewrite of his logline. Okay, great. I have a question in chat. How do I feel about alternate structures? I'm not sure exactly what that means, like 4-act. So every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So first, a second, and a third act. In hour-long TV, they actually are written out as 5 acts. So we have 5-act breaks, right, in a traditional hour-long show. But that doesn't change the fact that the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So really, 5 acts is actually 3 acts. 3 acts is really 3 acts. 1 act is really 3 acts. So I think that ultimately there kind of can't be a different paradigm than beginning, middle, and end, right? So no matter what you're using, I think that aspect is always going to be there. The 3-act structure is very baked into the idea of how we understand stories in general. 7-act I've never heard of, so you've lost me there. Ravenstar says, are the loglines we're focusing on meant to be the same project we shared last week? They can be, yeah, if you want. If you feel that you've revised your logline from last week and you don't need any more feedback, you don't need to share it today. But if you still have questions about it or you've modified it and you aren't sure about it, then you can get extra feedback on it today, yes. Aniket says, I don't have an idea for a show yet. Can I come up with a logline before the next session? Yeah, sure. You never actually have to share. Any week you can share whatever you feel you need feedback on. If you just want to listen in or anything else, that's always also totally fine. So if you don't have an idea for a show yet, brainstorm today. Think of new ideas and spend this whole week filling out various sketchbooks, or maybe have one sketchbook where you try to just write down different ideas. Try to have a finished logline by next class if you can. But next class we will check in one more time on loglines and that will be our last logline day, will be next Sunday. So yes, take your time if you need to think of a show. You don't have to, it's better to take a little time rather than share something totally unfinished. All right. So if everyone's clear on story engines, hopefully you're seeing how the engine of your concept can generate conflict for many different episodes. We're going to get a little bit into, I want to touch on time slot and format, then I'll get into genres and loglines. Excuse me. So, let's look at time slot and format. I'll be pretty quick on this just because I went into this a lot more in depth last week. Your options are half hour or full hour. If you're writing half hour, it's like 30 to 35 pages. If you're writing 60-minute, it's 60 to 65 pages. These are half hour usually going to be comedy shows and very episodic, very sort of serialized thing of the week type shows, but there's enough exceptions nowadays that that's not necessarily true. You can write drama, horror, anything else at half hour if you want to. Hour-long shows you can write in any genre, except the one real exception. The thing that doesn't exist in Western media is hour-long comedy. So that would be the one thing I would say, don't pick that genre because it doesn't exist, is hour-long sitcom, for instance. We just don't have that, and most people probably wouldn't read it because they'd be like, this person, even by writing this, has proved that they don't understand TV writing to some extent. So don't write an hour-long sitcom. But beyond that, you can write hour-long whatever you want. We have hour-long superhero cartoons now, so you could do that. Literally, the doors are wide open to anything at all except for hour-long comedy. And then there are other formats of shows, 15-minute or 70-minute miniseries or limited series or web shows or things like that. They exist, but I'm not going to be focusing on those in these classes. For the most part, pilots for a standard TV writing portfolio are 60-minute or 30-minute. Let's look at premise versus status quo. So a premise, these are called continuity formats. Continuity means how does the story carry over from episode to episode? How does it continue from one episode to the next, right? A premise pilot is like a long movie in what would be or I guess I should say it's like the first chapter in a long movie, right? So this is a very long story that will take potentially years and years to get through the entire thing, but we need to follow it linearly and watch every episode to understand what's happening in the next one. A show like Mr. Robot or whatever, right? We have to actually watch every episode. You can't just drop in at any point and know what's going on or who the characters are. So the characters are going to change over the course of many seasons, and in any case, these are going to be shows that the character is changing gradually over time. Change in TV is more gradual than change in movies. Your character doesn't have to be a drastically different person by the end of the pilot. TV is more about we slowly change the protagonist on an episode-by-episode basis so that maybe a season or two down the line there's somebody else, right? But it takes longer for characters to change on TV simply because we can explore the day-to-day moments of their lives and their lives simply take up more space on the screen than movie characters who really only exist in very brief flashes, right? Just 2 hours, then they're gone forever. Status quo is the other continuity format. This is one that resets the continuity every episode. Something like most cartoons are going to be the status quo. Sitcoms, procedurals like Law and Order or cop procedurals, medical procedurals, things like this. These are mostly going to be shows you can tune in at any time and watch them in any order. You won't miss anything. So you have to make it very clear if you're doing one type of show or the other one, because the main difference is that a premise pilot is going to have lots of questions unanswered, lots of conflicts unresolved, and lots of maybe antagonists undefeated or things like that, right? We have to leave track for the story to go down. And in the last few pages, especially in like the stinger, for instance, you want to kind of suggest this is where it's going. This is what antagonists we're going to have to deal with again next week. Or maybe, we beat one monster, but we awoke into the hive of 1,000 other monsters or whatever it is. So you have to leave some threads kind of untied off and some questions unanswered in a premise pilot. You can't solve every single problem by the end of a premise pilot, or else it will feel like this isn't a premise pilot. This is a status quo show. Whereas a status quo show, it should actually wrap up every thread by the end, with rare exceptions. Generally, you should be wrapping up all the threads, and you should be resolving the main conflict in such a way that we sort of understand that the pieces are going to be there to pick up for next week. If you blow up the world at the end of the status quo show, we might kind of be left in kind of questioning how there could be more of this same status quo, right? Unless you're setting up the idea that the entire world resets, like a Courage the Cowardly Dog episode or something like that, where literally a character could die at the end of an episode, then we come back next week and everything is fine again. You might build out that expectation, but that usually only works in cartoons. I don't think there's any live action examples of that, at least on right now. Anyway, hopefully this makes sense, these two major continuity formats. Premise versus status quo. And you should be labeling and making that choice for your show and plotting accordingly and deciding what am I going to answer, what conflicts are going to be fully tied off and resolved by the end, and what will still be going, right? And if you're doing the problem of the week, which usually thing of the week is how we describe the status quo type show, then we need to resolve the thing of the week entirely by the end and leave your characters in a position where they're ready to take on the next thing of the week. Whether that's a domestic problem of the week, or maybe it's a emergency rescue of the week or something like that. We conclude that, however, whether it ends well or whether it ends badly, and we say, next week there will be another one kind of like this. Eden mentions Supernatural. Nobody ever permadies in the show besides Charlie. Yeah, okay, some shows in the sort of more comic book kind of tradition, or certain like fantasy type genres where the characters don't ever really testing. Sorry, my mic came unplugged. Am I back? I think I'm back. Okay, looks like I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Alright. Where are we? So, I hope everyone's super clear on premise versus status quo and on their time slot. So we're talking time slot and continuity format. So you should be able to say this is a 30-minute status quo, or this is an hour-long premise show, etc. The last thing that we'll touch on is genres. So these are basically your options when it comes to genre. I wouldn't make up your own genres. And I wouldn't try to combine more than two different things because it will just then be very unclear what you're going for or how to give feedback to it. So comedy, drama, crime, sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, mystery, thriller, and horror. Basically your options, and you can see some of those have slashes between them, indicating that some people sort of just lump those together. So they may not even be fully distinct TV genres on their own. Mystery thriller is pretty much the same genre on TV, for instance. Horror is sort of a newer TV genre as of, I don't know, the Walking Dead kind of era, I guess, is what ushered in this idea of horror as a TV show. It was really rare to see in the past, so that is a distinct genre now, in any case. And you can combine two of these, so you could say this is going to be a crime sci-fi show if you're doing like a Minority Report kind of thing, right? Or maybe we're doing a horror comedy show like Ash versus the Evil Dead, or something like that. But you can see how we can always just boil it down to two. Don't include a big list of genres if you want the audience to know what they're getting into, right? If you say it's 9 different flavors, then nobody knows if they should show up for that meal. So pick 2 genres at the most. And now let's get into logline. So series logline, we touched on pilot logline, so I'll just go back to that template. When or after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. Those are the basic things we want to know. What starts off the story? Who is the main character? What are they up against? And what happens if they don't? Where is the urgency coming from? So let's look at series logline, which is in opposition to the pilot logline a little bit farther back, right? We're looking at the entire show, and we're conveying the sort of idea of the story engine, which is the central conflicts and dynamics of the show that will sustain many episodes of a theoretical series that you probably will not get, so do not write further episodes beyond the pilot. Ever. Don't ever do it. Unique characters, story worlds, or situations that promise many episodes are kind of where the emphasis is in terms of the series logline. And a series logline is a little different than a movie because sometimes a TV show builds on the initial concept over time, premise shows especially. And so because of that, the emphasis is on the compelling characters and the intriguing worlds that they exist in. So instead of looking more at the rules and guidelines, let's just look up some examples here. So like here's an example of a kind of abstract series logline, right? This isn't telling me one concrete tangible goal the characters need to accomplish. It's more describing the type of conflict that every episode is going to revolve around. A black family man struggles to gain a sense of cultural identity while raising his kids in a predominantly white upper middle class neighborhood. It was called Blackish Status Quo Comedy, 30-minute, that ran for many years and just ended a couple years ago. So struggling to gain a sense of cultural identity is the type of conflict that every other episode of the show will revolve around. It doesn't say specifically he has to make 100 pies in order to be accepted in this neighborhood or something like that, right? We don't have the really clear goalpost on the logline. Whereas in a pilot logline, you'd want to say something like, when he shows up in this neighborhood, he has 1 week to make 100 pies in order to be accepted by his neighbors, or something like that, right? So that's a dumb example. But you see how the really tangible number, the end date, the ticking clock, those things are really useful in terms of pilot loglines. Series logline is a little bit broader. If you do have a ticking clock for the whole series, you can include it. Like, this is a crime drama or crime thriller premise, right? A fast-talking financial advisor drags his family from Chicago to the Missouri Ozarks, where he must launder $500 million in 5 years to appease a drug boss. That's my favorite series logline of all time, because it includes absolutely everything, right? We have adjective, protagonist, who is the rest of the cast, so what's the kind of team-up or the dynamics between these people. We might imagine that because he has to drag his family, that they are not actually actively interested or involved in the crime shenanigans, and that he's going to have to balance these two separate lives of crime life and family life, right? And we even know who the villain is. It's a drug boss that he has 5 years to appease, so we know what the timeline is. We know specifically what the goalpost is. So this one has that really clear sense of time and goalpost, and this could almost be a movie logline just on a longer scale, right? You don't absolutely need to clarify that. If you don't have a clear finish line, like Breaking Bad doesn't really have that clear goal or finish line from the beginning, besides he's trying to make money for his family and get as far as he can, right? A high school chemistry teacher diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer turns to manufacturing and selling meth to secure his family's future. Notice again, we do mention the other characters or the other dynamics of the protagonist's life. He is making money or he's making drugs, and also has a family that he cares about and is trying to help and support, but by doing increasingly dangerous, illegal things. So in that one, we don't really have that end goal built into it. It's not like he has to make $100 million by January 8th in order to secure his family's future or whatever. But at the end of the day, we understand the interesting character, the interesting world or dynamic of social world that they live in, and how that's going to end up creating conflict for years and supporting years of dramatic narrative. Let's look at questions in the chat. Ginger says, which logline is the one that's used when you're looking at a show on Netflix, for example? So that's different. When we're talking loglines, these are things that are mostly used internally by us, the writers. Like it's not easy to just look up a movie or show and find, quote, the official logline. They don't really have official loglines. Like when the writer first pitched that show, they might have had something that changed over time, and then maybe in the marketing for that show on the streaming site, they rewrote it again. Like, we can't really assess what the official singular loglines are for professional work, unless you talk to that writer and maybe they have the very first version of it that they used. So what you're looking at in terms of Netflix are going to be more similar to the series loglines, because they're going to tell you what the show is in general, right? It's going to be like, what is it, a smart and sassy monster hunter lives in downtown Toronto and must battle vampires, or something like that, right? Like, that's pretty much a series logline. And then when you look at the episode descriptions, that's going to be a little closer to what we're doing for the pilot logline, which is like, when she moves to the suburbs of Toronto, a sassy demon hunter must first fight a mummy. That's going to be like the very first of those conflicts that we are going to illustrate and see played out in the show. The biggest, and this came up a lot last week, I would recommend everyone really carefully look at this. The biggest problem with these series and pilot loglines, from students in these courses and just from people who are breaking into this in general, is that they feel like separate shows. So they shouldn't feel like completely different shows. Like if you mention, for instance, the series logline is like, the smart and sassy monster hunter moves to Toronto and now fights vampires. And then in the pilot logline, you're like, Jeff, a werewolf, needs to earn his very first tooth necklace as part of his tribe's initiation ceremony. Then we'll be like, wait, what about the monster hunter? What about Toronto? That sounds like a different show. So ultimately, make sure your series and pilot loglines feel like they're the same show and referring to the same characters that you just mentioned. Don't introduce a new cast of characters with both separate loglines. Okay, hopefully that helps. Thank you for the question, Ginger. So I'm going to move forward a little bit. I want to give a couple last tips and answer any last questions on loglines. Then we will share and post for feedback. So don't post them yet. I'll let you know in just these next couple minutes. Let me take any questions on loglines or anything we've talked about today in relation to pilot writing. I'll just leave these tips up as I'm answering the questions. Go ahead. And in the meantime, I see a few folks are typing. As we're doing this, be getting your logline ready to copy and paste, because in the next 5 minutes we will share them, and I will be taking them in the order that they come in. So, any questions that I can tackle before we share? Feel free to raise a hand or use the text chat either way. Okay, no questions. Sounds good. Let's share Loglines then. Feel free to post what you've got. And as you guys are posting, I'm going to briefly touch on comps. You don't have to have comps as you share your Loglines, but you can. So as you are posting, I'll just briefly talk over what comps are. So comps we usually include in the ultimate, like this should go at the top of your sketchbook page. And you can have a couple different ideas if you're not sure which ones to settle on. But we really are comparing your show to 2 other works of fiction. At least one of them should be a TV show. So don't list 2 books or 2 movies or 2 video games or whatever, but nowadays one of them can be one of those other things if you really want to. You can comp a play or a video game if you want. You can comp Hamilton or Gears of War in your TV show comp. Someone do Hamilton meets Gears of War. But one of them does have to be a TV show, though. So, Hamilton meets The Office or Gears of War meets, Lost. And now we're cooking. Now that feels a little bit more like a show. So definitely don't do 2 things that are not shows. You might think of it in these terms, the world of X, but with the style, tone, or approach of Y. That's not an exact science, and that's not always going to work. So try your best. Just if this is part of what you have so far, you can share the comps because it is helpful in picturing the overall vision of the show. They tend to skew towards things that are a little bit more recent, so don't pick things that are going to be obscure or that no one will know. You don't earn points for someone not knowing what your comps are. And don't pick trendy things that are way over comped. If you're picking if you're writing a fantasy show, don't comp Lord of the Rings meets Harry Potter, because we'll just be like, come on. Okay, so try to narrow it down to 2. Try to make it clear what you're going for in your show, and don't mislead the audience. So if your show is purely historical, don't comp something with supernatural elements, or else we're going to start thinking you comp Pirates of the Caribbean and Lord of the Rings, so we expect magic in your show too. So don't lead us down the wrong path with your comps, would be my only tip. Okay, let's look at the Loglines we have to share today. Okay, looks like we have Eden, Vicky, Sinzanal, Luke, Charlie, Michael, Raven. Alright, a bunch to get to, and not a ton of time, so we're going to get to as many as I can. You will need to unmute and answer questions and discuss your idea. If you're not able to do that, I will have to skip you for now. So be ready to unmute as we go from person to person. Okay, and if I gave you feedback last week or multiple times in the past before, I might take a little less time on it than on somebody that's thing is brand new. All right, let's start with Eden for Ecce Homo.
Hello, I still don't know how to pronounce that, so good enough. I have revised the pilot logline thoroughly, and the series logline is I think I'm getting there.
All right. Go ahead.
And for comps, I genuinely cannot find anything that would be even remotely similar besides, like I mentioned last time, Zootopia, but that is remote, like second cousin twice removed from the brother's mother's horse.
Okay, so it's usually a red flag for an idea if you can't think of a single comp that is anything remotely like it. So you don't have to have the answers now, but just over the coming weeks, maybe ask around. Maybe some folks will have, like especially maybe in the sci-fi chat or something like that, people might have some ideas for you. I would just try to have, even if they're not perfect, try to have some kind of comps attached to the idea.
Why?
Why?
Is originality a bad thing?
No, it's less about originality, and it's more, it's about us being able to assess what your goals are or intentions are for the show, what the tone is going to be like, or any number of other aspects like that. So it's for us to be able to tell what you're trying to make.
You get the tone from the genre, and you get the goals from the log lines or from asking questions. So I don't see the problem.
Not everyone's going to ask you questions about your script. A lot of the time you can put in a couple things like the logline, title, genre, comps, and that's all you have to get somebody to read it. If you don't include comps at all, less people will read the episode. That's just how it works. All right, so can you read out your series logline for us?
Okay, my series logline is: in a world where genetic engineering breeds a subjugated class, a resilient gaggle of biogenetically engineered cat boys must navigate abandonment and abuse, forging deep bonds as they challenge societal norms, offering a poignant social commentary on the nature of humanity and self. Like I said, that's a work in progress.
Okay.
And my, you just said series logline, right?
Yeah, you can read the pilot next if you want to. The one thing I'll say on this is, so don't talk about the themes or the social impact of the show. That's up to the audience to assess. So the basics: in a world where genetic engineering breeds a subjugated class, I get that, okay. A resilient gaggle of biogenetically engineered. So let's try to avoid repeating words too many times. You say genetic engineering twice, or maybe even 3 times in this logline. So if you can just think of a slightly different way to phrase it, just to avoid feeling repetitive. They must navigate abandonment and abuse, forging deep bonds as they challenge social norms. Okay, I'm not 100% understanding what the characters are exactly trying to do besides just kind of live their lives. Is there more to it? Do they have more of a goal than that?
Well, like I said before, they're a slave race, so there is a kind of trying to emancipate themselves, but not like actively.
How do you emancipate yourself passively? Are they working towards freedom, or aren't they, I guess, is the question.
They aren't.
They aren't.
They think it's the status quo, but the people around them think differently, and the conflict arises when they are deprogrammed, so to speak. I don't like to use that word because people have mistook my characters for robots, which they are not. That's why I specifically use biogenetically engineered to make abundantly and crystal clear that they are, in fact, biological beings.
Okay. Let's move on to the pilot logline, but just in terms of the series logline, I cannot picture what your characters are doing in terms of a goal. If you say they are working towards freedom eventually...
Yeah, like I said, that wouldn't need work.
That's okay. So
my pilot logline, I think I finally got it to a point where I like it.
Okay.
Okay. So, pilot logline. When a reclusive ex-cage fighter meets an abused teen, forming an unlikely bond, they both become mentors to a fish-out-of-water gentle giant on trial for assault to acclimate to the... oh boy, too many twos. To acclimate him to the vast world he is experiencing for the first time so he can integrate into society.
Whoa. Okay. So too many ideas. This is a bit of a run-on sentence. Let's look at the basics. So a reclusive ex-cage fighter forms an unlikely bond with an abused teen. They both become mentors to a fish-out-of-water gentle giant on trial for assault. To acclimate to... Wait, what? They become mentors?
Acclimate.
Right, I know the word, but are you saying they both become mentors to this giant with the intention of helping him acclimate to the world? Is that right?
Yeah.
I think there's some words missing here.
In order to probably there should be...
Okay, so like in order to help him acclimate to the vast world he is experiencing for the first time so he can integrate to society. So way too much information, and it's just a very long sentence with too many, in order to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this. So I would try to cut back and just simplify a little bit. And also, why do they have to do this? I missed the cause and effect. What's the cause and effect here?
Well, if they don't acclimate him, he's not going to be a part of the society. Isn't that like the goal?
I don't know. What's their relationship to this guy? You're saying they become mentors to him Is he a family friend? What is their relationship to this giant guy?
That's what you have to find out. That's why you want to watch that now.
No. So you're not trying to tease people with the log lines. You have to lay out what is happening in the episode. The tease should be, this is an interesting dramatic situation that you're now going to you're going to watch because you have the key info. You're not going to watch it to get the key info. So there might be a way there that you can just clarify what is the connection between these people. You say they must do this.
Okay.
If they must do it, then it should be clear why they must, right?
Is there another word for pound that doesn't sound so much animals and cagey?
Did you say pound, like a pound for
Yes.
dogs and cats?
Yes. Yes, like a
I don't know.
because the main setting of
Shelter?
of my pilot is basically what I just quote unquote call a pound, because it is where these people are sheltered. That's a good word.
Yeah.
So basically, the three of them end up in the same shelter because they're part of the genetically engineered race of non-people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the whole point. They want to integrate this third one into society because their goal is to either get adopted or get a job.
Okay,
So
wait.
they don't, so they don't become like a burden on society and prove themselves to people for being somehow useful, I guess.
Okay, so all of the characters are in, like, prison together, basically?
They're not in prison. They can go in and out. It's not a prison. That's why I don't want to use the word pound. It's more like a homeless shelter, but they're not homeless. They have rooms there. I mean,
Okay.
there's probably a word, but I don't know.
Okay, well, you can do some more thinking on what the specific word for the type of institution it is. But just in terms of cause and effect. So it seems like you are stacking up several different incidents. One, you have the cage fighter meeting and bonding with this teen, and then another incident of they become mentors to this other character that is on trial for assault. So I think that's if I in terms of cause and effect, usually the first thing leads to the next thing, right? So the first thing that we say causes the next thing that you mentioned to happen. But is these two meeting and bonding, is that what causes them to then become mentors to this guy?
This is why I asked you about the different act number structures, because I am working with a 7-act structure in this specific instance, actually.
Okay.
And it is separated into 2 parts. So it is one pilot, but it can technically function as 2 episodes if you squint and tilt your head. And the first one is the cage fighter and the teen meeting and bonding, and the second part is them two being already met and bonded, meeting this third guy who they take under their collective wing, basically.
Oh, so you're saying this is 2 separate stories.
The teen becomes the mentor to third one.
So you're saying these are 2 separate stories?
No, they're connected. They're very much connected. One cannot function without the other.
Okay, so I think you just need the sense of cause and effect in the logline itself, though. So for instance, you might start with, you say he's on trial for assault. Why not start with that? When a blank character is in trouble for assault for whatever, then you would say this character must exonerate him or must do blank and get him, help him break out of jail, whatever it is that your character's goal actually is. So maybe you could start with the assault or the problem that the giant caused. Because that's the cause, right?
Yeah, but well, that's the cause why he ended up in the shelter pound
Okay.
rescue place.
That's why he needs help at acclimating to the world, right?
Well, he was on trial for that, but he was pardoned, and that's like a big thing in the world because it's the first instance where one of their kind was not put to death for something like that. He was pardoned and released into this facility, and he's like the only one who is technically not allowed to leave it because he's still like under strict supervision.
But in the logline, you say
because
he's on trial.
everybody thinks he's dangerous.
In the logline, doesn't it say he's on trial for assault?
How do you say when he's off the trial, like past the trial, like?
He was exonerated for assault, or acquitted.
Acquitted. I think acquitted makes sense.
Okay. So yeah.
Or pardoned. Pardoned. I specifically used the word pardon in my script, and I didn't. Yeah, pardoned.
Okay, so that's a totally different conflict than a character that is actively on trial, I guess. So I would just maybe look into rephrasing that.
I mean, the first half he's still on trial, and it culminates with the two main characters finding out that he has been pardoned.
So they don't have to interact with the trial at all.
They interact with the trial because it concerns them, because it's part of their people being tried for something that they perceive as self-defense.
Right, but if they're not participating in it, then it's not actually part of the main plot of the episode, it sounds like. It's not really like the conflict that these characters are trying to resolve. Is it?
The conflict they're trying to resolve is integrating him into society because he's never seen spoons and forks, basically.
Okay, so I think you should start with the problem, and then tell us what the characters are doing to solve it. So don't start with the character, then tell us the problem, then tell us what someone else is doing to solve it. So start with something like when he's acquitted for, or maybe when when a gentle giant struggles to reintegrate into society, a reclusive ex-cage fighter and his, I don't know, friend, whatever it is, must help him acclimate before or else blank. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so cause and effect, start with the problem. Main character, ... must solve it like this, before / or else this. That's the stakes.
Can you throw this into my DMs for me, please?
Sure.
All of it, including the corrected logline.
Yeah, no problem. I didn't mark it up too much, but I'll send this to you, sure. No problem.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for sharing. Hope that was helpful. Let's move on to our next one. Let me scroll up here. Wait, where did she go? There it is. Okay, I will send this to you. And then we will move down the list. Sorry, scrolling back up. Looks like we have Vicky. All right, Vicky, you're invited to the stage. Let's talk Beyond the Signals. Go ahead.
Yes. I think the series logline is okay. I added like 1 or 2 things to it only.
Okay.
The one that I had trouble with was the pilot logline. But I suppose we have to read both to like have the context.
Yeah, go ahead, just read the whole thing.
Okay. So the series logline would be when their best friend disappears in a series of mysterious disappearances that devastate a bay town in the south of Chile. A pair of twin witches join forces with an American investigator to discover what's behind them before the entire town vanishes.
Nice, very nice. The only thing is when their best friend disappears in a series of mysterious disappearances, just sounds kind of repetitive, is the only thing. So, when their best friend is the most recent victim in a series of disappearances, something like that. Do you see? You just change the first couple words of that sentence there, just to make it not repeat itself. They devastate a bay town in the south of Chile. Okay, a pair of twin witches join forces with an American investigator to discover what's behind them before the entire town vanishes. Great. All right, the rest of it looks really good. Let's do the pilot.
Okay. A misanthropic witch uses her budding powers of clairvoyance to search for her missing best friend while evading a relentless CIA agent investigating the paranormal events.
Nice. So, is this the guy they're going to like team up with him by the end of the episode? Is that right?
In this episode, they're not going to team up with him, but I'm going to present him like they're eventually going to have to team up with.
You mean like later episodes down the line?
Yes, but I'm going to present him like part of the investigation.
So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier about like different shows in the series and Pilot Logline. It sounds like the pair of witches joining forces with the American investigator if that doesn't happen in the pilot, you should rethink the series logline itself. Or make them team up in the pilot. That would probably be my recommendation, is team up at least by the 50-60% of the way through the episode. Maybe that's the midpoint. Maybe that's the escalation or something like that. Or at least have them start to, drift towards working on the same side by the end. Have them sort of working together by the end. That would be my recommendation. If you don't do that, you may have to change the series logline, because it's presenting the idea that the pilot is the first chapter in this overall series, right? So the pilot is supposed to act as like a trailer for the series. And so if you're saying that a big part of the hook of the show is this central team up, then the central team up has to happen in the pilot. Otherwise, you wouldn't lead with that.
Okay, so maybe I have to change the ending, because like they don't team up really. He's like there and he's like making a bit more trouble than what he's helping in the beginning.
Okay, yeah, then I wouldn't say they're really if they're not joining forces with him in the pilot, then in that case, it sounds like they're kind of competing with him. Is that right?
In a way, yes.
So maybe look into some word like that. Maybe compete's not the exact right thing, but a pair of witches compete with an American investigator. They're both trying to discover what's behind them before the town vanishes. Does that sound like it could kind of describe your show?
Yeah, that sounds a bit more like it.
Okay, yeah, they don't have to work together. If they're going to have an antagonistic relationship all throughout, then you're going to want to hint at that early on. So that would be something like that is how I would probably present it. And then, yeah, the fact that you're framing it as she needs to evade him, that's great. It's just that you haven't... Isn't there a twin character in the pilot? Or no?
She is, but she's not as relevant as her sister in this one.
Okay, I understand. In that case...
During the series, they're going to have like different like dynamics of who takes the episode and who doesn't.
I see.
Like they both are going to have different like set of stories at a certain point.
Okay, understood. Does the feedback I've given so far make sense of how you might want to either rethink the team up idea or change the series logline just to make it seem a little more competitive between the cops and the witches?
Yes, I think that compete is better in this case.
Okay, great. Well, hope that's helpful then. I think by now you've refined this enough that I get the setup, and looking forward to seeing more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do Sins and All with thank you for being here with us. Hello.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, I can hear you. Thanks for
Okay,
joining
yeah,
us.
I'm confused.
No problem. Why don't you read out what you have for us today?
Okay, so I have the series loglined as a reformed gangster navigates post-rapture chaos, torn between his criminal inheritance and caring for a child.
All right.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, and do you want me to go on with the pilot logline?
Yeah, go ahead. Read the other one too.
Okay, cool. When the rapture tears away his baby mama and son, a repentant gangster is forced to assume his role as head of the family in order to protect himself and a child amidst gang rivalry.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. So this is about a gangster trying to maintain a sort of or build a new crime empire after the Rapture. Is that right?
Essentially, well, so what I didn't go into context is like prior to this, he had just been released from prison, and he's coming out and assuming as soon when he comes out, something happens at the like in the teaser of the pilot that forces him to like, okay, you're next in line for this, but he's reformed out of prison and he doesn't necessarily want to take it. But when this happens, he's forced to kind of, assume this power.
He's forced to? Why is he forced to?
Essentially because the person who took we're gonna air quote throne, the person who took the throne in his absence essentially is raptured. And so with no one left to assume power, he's basically forced to, because there's other gangs trying to come in and take the territory, and basically they can't do that with him there, so they're trying to eliminate him. So he's forced to assume this power in order to protect himself.
Okay, and he can't just leave. Why?
He can't just leave because it basically, in the world that they live in, it's kind of in poverty. It would be really hard for him to just up and just leave basically fresh out of prison with nothing to his name, no family, because they've all been raptured as well.
Don't you think maybe The Leftovers might be a good comp for this, considering that's like an HBO drama that takes place after a Rapture type event?
I've never seen The Leftovers, so that would be a good thing to mark down.
That would certainly be a good comp for you. And let me ask, is the tone, this is pretty serious?
Yeah, this would be more so, really super dramatic with, undertones of certain, comedy between like characters and dialogue, but overall the entire tone would be pretty serious.
Okay, so The Leftovers and The Wire sounds like a good set of comps. It's an original idea. The genres you've listed are crime, thriller, and anthology. How is this an anthology?
An anthology because the "Thank you for being with us" tag would be a running motif in the season of like this cult who basically is predicting the world is going to like be raptured and Judgment Day will come. But essentially each season would take place with a different cast of characters, but around the central event of basically where were you when the rapture happened.
Okay, I would not describe that as an anthology. An anthology are usually going to be completely separate stories that are linked maybe by like the genre or something like that. And The Leftovers, by the way, has a similar idea where the different seasons have different central characters in the cast, so that is an even better comp, but no one describes The Leftovers as an anthological. So in any case, this sounds like this is a crime slash. So let me ask, are there more supernatural things that happen throughout the show, or are we in the aftermath of a supernatural event?
The aftermath of a supernatural event.
Okay, so there's no more magic stuff. There's no more angels, demons, gods, or monsters. Or
No.
Okay.
No.
In that case, I would just probably leave it as crime for now. I was going to say crime slash fantasy, but if there are not more magic things happening, then it probably won't really feel like a fantasy show. Does it feel kind of post-apocalyptic?
Yeah, for the most part. And then I was imagining things become more assuaged. But like for like the first half of the season, I kind of wanted it. I think one of the influences was almost like I don't know. You're familiar with Darren Aronofsky's like Mother, but I was imagining like when after the inciting incident, whenever like that seal on that movie kind of breaks, I was imagining that's how like the pilot episode runs until it's like this consensus. He assuages the role. He takes everything. He basically finds himself in a really safe position, and then we kind of go on with like the crime portion of it. But for the most part, it kind of just assuages. Society kind of falls back into the norm.
Okay, so yeah, you might even consider this post-apocalyptic. So we could say post-apocalyptic crime show might be a good way to sort of phrase this. I guess it is literally post-apocalypse, right? If the rapture is like Armageddon or whatever. But the world wasn't destroyed, you're saying? It was just like sort of the people get sucked up in the sky or whatever?
Essentially, yeah. The world wasn't destroyed. People go up, and whoever is, here with us is just left behind. No more hope or anything like that.
I see. Okay. So a crime show set in this sort of post-rapture world is a strong idea, definitely. I would like to see that. And, what in a world where money might not even matter anymore, what does crime look like? I'm interested in these things. A reformed gangster navigates post-rapture chaos, torn between his criminal inheritance and caring for a child. So criminal inheritance is kind of vague. He's in charge of a crime empire, right?
Essentially. And what sent him to jail is what also caused him to lose it. But whenever he comes out, due to the rapture, he's kind of like the only one left that can handle this role.
Okay. And what's his relationship to the child?
This is a child that has kind of been left behind, and he runs into them. And I was imagining there's like this little father and son relationship, seeming that like it says in the pilot episode, like when the rapture tears away his baby mama and his son, and he hasn't seen these people for like 5 years or however long he's been locked up. And so he kind of skipped out on a major portion of his son's life. And so whenever he loses his son, this is kind of like this child kind of serves as like almost like his redemption. So there's like a conflicting between like, do I accept this role and potentially put myself in harm's way, or how do I navigate caring for a child and this?
So something like, you might want to even frame it more like he's torn between his criminal empire and, you know, his family, or maybe something like caring for his adopted son or something like that. Just, even if that's not exactly what the dynamic is, that sort of is explaining why it's important to him, right? So you may just want to phrase it in such a way to emphasize what is the connection between them. If you just say caring for a child, it just means nothing to us. So make it clear why it matters to the character. And then, when the rapture tears away his baby mama and son, a repentant gangster is forced to assume his role as the head of the family in order to protect himself. And again, a child just doesn't quite sound important, so I would say something more like his adopted child, whatever it is, amidst gang rivalry. Yeah, I think I get it. So he's like high up in the organization, but wasn't expecting to have to take over, I suppose you're saying. And then the fact, and then this just presents an opportunity where it's like, if you don't take over, the family will fall apart, and also people might hunt you down and kill you.
Yes, bingo, right in the spot.
Got it. Okay, I understand. And if you can maybe just find a little bit more of a specific objective for the pilot, so he has to assume his role as at the head of this family in order to fend off an attack from this gang, or something like that, right? Or he needs to do this, like, find out what is the specific tangible objective that he has to accomplish. If that is, you know, he has to defend their territory, he has to take somebody out or take over some turf, something like that. Just paint for us a picture of what is the very first thing he has to do.
Yeah. And I have a question as well. So that essentially does happen in the pilot episode. As soon as before he's able to assume power, when he's still in this gray area, do I do it or do I not? There's a gang that comes in and basically tries to assassinate him. It fails, and that's what pushes him to accept the role. So how would I frame that in the pilot logline, but while still, you know, keeping the tearing away his, like, basically still keeping the elements of, you know, loss of his family, him regaining a sense of like his family and a child, and as well as kind of framing this attack. How would I frame that in a pilot logline?
So you're saying
within like 20 to 50 words.
Sure. So you're saying he has to protect himself, right? But that doesn't really have an end date on it. That doesn't have like one thing you need to do to protect yourself. So I would ask yourself, does he have to survive until winter? Does he have to, like, find a more concrete way of explaining what he has to actually do? So maybe it's he has to clear all the enemy gangs from his turf, right? Something like that, right? That would, when you do that, you will have protected yourself. You will have eliminated the threat. So you may have to just make the threat a little more tangible, right? Does he have to survive 3 assassination attempts before they're done? Does he have to find the 3 assassins? Does he have to, you know, I'm just naming random stuff. But this is just like an example of how you can take an intangible objective, protect yourself, and make it tangible. You have to put goalposts along the way and allow your character to say, like, once I do that specific thing, I will have accomplished the goal.
Okay, so essentially just being more specific and, you know, descriptive.
Yeah, more specific objective in the pilot logline will go very far and do a lot of the work for you.
Okay, cool.
Any questions?
No, I think I'm good. I think you summed it up pretty well.
Great. Okay, thank you so much for sharing.
You as well.
All right, let's keep going. Luke, are you still here? Hello.
Gonna be late. Yeah, I did a rewrite that I'd like some feedback on.
Sure. Go ahead and read it out for us.
This is the series logline. The pilot logline is hasn't changed, and it's not ready. I'd rate it if you could stop moving it around, please. Okay, thank you. When a deceased work dodger is resurrected in deep space with a mad doctor, a brainless captain, and an alien intruder, he must save the ship from interplanetary crises while trying to earn enough credit certificates to die.
Earn enough credit certificates to die. That's a pretty funny logline. Let me make sure I understand. So, what's a work dodger?
Someone who's chronically slacking off on the job, shirking their duties, doing the bare minimum amount of work, sort of putting their duties off on other people.
Would you say a slacker?
Yeah, I would. That's why I chose work dodger, because I don't like the word slacker for that. It's less apt than work dodger.
Okay, I'm just not sure that's a phrase I've heard in the world before. I mean, I kind of get what you mean, but I think most people would just say slacker in this case. When a deceased slacker is resurrected in deep space by the Mad Doctor or with a Mad Doctor? Whom is he resurrected by?
Like the computer, mainly. The Mad Doctor facilitates part of the procedure. It's mainly the ship resuscitating him.
Okay,
does that explain it?
Yeah, that does. So you might want to include that. So when he's resurrected on board of an intelligent AI, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, like when an out of control AI ship resurrects him on board, something like that, right? So the ship causes this.
And that would, yeah, because I mentioned the ship later, and it would, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but this clarifies why it actually happened in the first place. So he's resurrected by the ship in space, and these are just the other captives on board?
Before I answer that, do I need to include his death as like the inciting incident, or should I just?
I would understand his resurrection as the inciting incident because you.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I think I get it.
So what was the question again?
Are these the other crew members? The doctor, the captain, the alien intruder?
It's kind of like the other main like cast members.
Right, but so are they other people that have been resurrected on the same ship?
Not all of them have been resurrected, but they're all on the same ship, working with various contracts that they can't get out of either.
Okay. And he must save the ship from interplanetary crises while trying to earn enough credit certificates to die. If he doesn't save the ship from the crises, wouldn't he just die anyway?
God damn, that is a great, excellent problem that I have to solve with this logline. So, I guess if he dies, he'll just be resurrected again.
Okay.
And again and again and again until he pays his debt off or whatever. So yeah.
Can the ship be destroyed? Or can the ship be destroyed?
Potentially. And that could be a funny episode to have them try to destroy the ship.
Seems like their best bet. Especially if it's facing massive crises all the time.
It would be incredibly difficult to do.
Okay. So I guess there's your first little paradox or question or whatever is, if it's his job to save the ship from significant crises, then
it's not actually his job. It's just something he has to do because no one else does. And basically the brainless captain takes the credit every time.
So it's
just a situation he's been thrust into where there's a sci-fi problem of the week that he ultimately has to be the one to solve.
Right.
Because he's stuck with a bunch of people, constant infighting, and yeah, that's the whole thing.
And what happens
I think
if he fails?
Work through the whole series.
What happens if he just doesn't? What happens if he fails or does nothing?
If he fails or does nothing, Well, if he fails or does nothing, he's just going to be stuck there, and it's never going to improve. His situation's going to deteriorate. So if he wants to get out or improve his situation in any way, he's going to have to do something.
But so, is it that the crises would just make life on the ship worse, or is it that they actually threaten the ship or its crew in some significant way?
It's kind of all of the above. It can threaten a planet. It can threaten the ship. It can threaten a specific crew member. Their food supply. It's just a problem of the week kind of thing.
Right. But to me, the premise would be a little clearer if it were something like he has to, like, I understand that his goal is earn enough credit certificates or whatever to die, right? But that the problems coming up weren't things that existentially threatened either all the crew members or all of the function of the ship itself, because then it would simply be to your main character's advantage to simply let those things happen. I think if it was more like the ship is now being invaded by, I don't know, space cockroaches, right? And you have to resolve that, or else now you live on a ship that's infested with cockroaches, rather than the ship is going to be eaten by a space cockroach. Does that make sense? How the scale of the problem might kind of, or like tuning the scale of the problems might make the.
I don't understand the analogy at all.
If the scale of the problems is so large that it threatens the antagonist of the show, which is the ship, then it's to your main character's benefit to simply let the bad things happen, right?
Potentially, yeah, that would be true.
So if you phrase the sort of recurring conflict here as less interplanetary crises and more like things that threaten the day-to-day life on the ship, or maybe they're just like, I don't know, there's a gross smell in the vents, and now unless you solve that, you're going to live in a more miserable condition than you are now. I think that if you frame it as every episode is going to be some massive crisis, then it starts to become unclear either why your main character should act or how they would act. Go ahead.
If you remember the old logline, I had interplanetary crises juxtaposed against unclogging snack machines, like to sort of show the spectrum. I cut that for brevity, and I think this phrase has to kind of carry both. So what's a good 1 or 2 word phrase that means sci-fi problem of the week that could just be a microbe in the rice supply, or it could be, a black hole devouring a solar system, and you got to save a civilization, that kind of thing.
I would
sci-fi problem of the week.
I would look more at the middle of the logline then. So he must perform both unpleasant chores or you would say something like, here's 2 examples of things that he has to do in order to achieve his goal, which is earning enough credits in order to die.
So you're saying I need both? I can't just do it in one? Can't have one blanket term for Star Trek episodic problems? Like,
I guess you could. I mean, you could say something like he must help maintain the ship in order to earn enough credits to die, or something like that. I'm not 100%.
That just sounds like he's doing like welding or something on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, is it that he gets more credits when there's a bigger problem or something like that?
He doesn't get any credits for the problems are solved, and he doesn't get any payment or recognition for helping solve them. It's kind of the running joke.
Oh, then why in the logline do you say he has to do this in order to earn credits?
Well, the credits he's earning through his job, like unclogging snack machines and corporate drudgery and that kind of thing.
Oh, so he doesn't need to save the ship from anything then, in that case, right? He just needs to do his job and keep his head down.
Well, how can you do your job and keep your head down if, the sun is going to destroy the office if the boss doesn't, draw the office curtains, but the boss is too busy, or the boss is on vacation or something like that.
But you want the office to be destroyed. That's his goal, is to die. Right?
Okay, well, destroy the entire ship not is really difficult. If he just lets everyone die, the ship will bring them back, and the whole thing will start over again. Like, I feel like we're talking in circles about this. I kind of see what you're saying, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, the ship is like a city. It is a self-sustaining like fortress, basically, with expendable crew that can just be like rebuilt from scratch as needed. So yeah, those ones that might actually destroy the ship that come up rarely, maybe he would actually actively try to have the ship be destroyed. But otherwise, he has to do something. Do you see what I'm saying?
But the thing that you're phrasing the character doing in the logline usually is in service of achieving their main goal, right?
I see.
And so if saving saving the ship from these crises, that's not actually earning him credits to die. That's actually working against his main goal.
It's part of the premise of the show. Like, how do I include that? That's like the meat and potatoes of the show. No one wants to see him just doing drudgery and paying the bills, but even though that's part of it, how do I...
It might just be an issue with the premise itself, I'm not sure.
Oh my god, I've rewritten this thing too many times. I'm just gonna chuck it in the fire. Okay. I'm late. I'm so late. Oh my god, and I hate this. I hate everything. I was behind by like 4 milliseconds, and I'm like 45 minutes late. Oh my god. Okay.
We can talk more on this soon. Yeah, don't worry. Feel free to bring it to a lab or any other workshop or class, and we can get more into it. But hope this is at least giving you some things to think about for now.
Sure. I will think about it. Anyway, thank you. Adios.
All right. Thanks so much for sharing. So, we are almost at the end of our time, so I think I will just have time to do one more for now. But we have many other opportunities on the server to get feedback. We've got script swaps 3 times a week. We've got readings multiple times a week. We've got many different channels for feedback and for sharing and for, swapping with others. So definitely try to, if you would really like to be in the pilot class moving forward, you can either sign up and then send me a message or tag me, and I can review your logline before next week. Or if you are not sure, you can always just spend this next week, work on the loglines and on the setup for the show as best you can. And then for next weekend, make sure you sign up before that class. For anyone wondering how to sign up, again, if you're still with us, thank you for being here. Scriptcamp.net is the website to go to. You'll scroll down to Unlimited, and you can enroll there, or save 40% if you subscribe yearly. All right, I will take one last logline, and then anything else that you guys wanted feedback on this week will be a fine time for you to do that. Let's look at Charlie's script, Alterity. Hello.
Hi.
All right, we have a sci-fi detective type show, it looks like. Why don't you read out what you have here for us?
So the series logline is after EMP is down the global grid, igniting the Great War of 2000 to 2018, the UK recovers under a new draconian direction.
Okay, and the pilot?
When his family are threatened, a hustler with a head for numbers must track down an aristocrat and convince her to return to her affluent borough before his illegal business is destroyed.
All right, thanks for that. So, crime drama. Okay, so you have not included sci-fi as one of your comps here. That kind of tells us that there's not going to be more science fiction-y stuff throughout the rest of the show. Is that right?
It's not really science fiction, no. It's more, like when I have altered carbon as the comp. It's more aesthetically, like there's the juxtaposition of a late Victorian and Edwardian aesthetic for the affluent society, and like the working class to poverty stricken live almost in like a dystopian early stage cyberpunk aesthetic. So that's more so the reason for those comps, because visually that's the backdrop to the story.
Okay, maybe something like Mr. Robot would be a little bit more down to earth and like early stage cyberpunk.
I'll see. Yeah, I'll take a look at that and see.
Altered Carbon is a very, very sci-fi choice, and that kind of tells us that the world itself would have some sci-fi elements built into it, so I'd probably not use that one. 71 I've not heard of. Maybe that works, but in any case, just trying to figure out what you're trying to make. This is why comps are important.
Mm-hmm.
All right, logline. So after EMPs down the global grid, igniting the Great War of 2008 to 2018, the UK recovers under a new draconian direction. So who is the cast of the characters?
So beginning, the protagonist would be Daniel. He is the hustler.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sort of ensemble cast for the series, but you do have like a main protagonist. But people will come in and out like during the season. It's definitely an ensemble, so I didn't name everyone that you come across.
But when you say the UK, does that mean like the characters are going to be politicians?
Well, no, because you'll come across some politicians. You'll come across like, so in 71, one of the comps, it's basically about like the troubles with the IRA during that time, and there's those elements within the story. So there's like former politicians, there are criminal elements, there's this guy, there's this girl. There are people in these neighborhoods or the boroughs which are more segregated than they were prior to the war because of this alternative timeline element. So you kind of meet all aspects of the society throughout the season and get a glimpse into this alternative reality.
Okay, so it's a true cross-section of life where there's some people in government, some civilians, some rich, some poor, and like just all of
exactly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly challenging to balance or to make that work, but maybe you do. And if that is truly the case, maybe the UK is actually just the best way to phrase what you're doing here. Normally, I would say something like, you would try to narrow the scope a little bit, right? So you'd say something like, in a United Kingdom recovering from an apocalyptic event, one group of the cabinet of the president try to pull the country together, right? Because that would sort of narrow the focus to, it's not those people. But if you're really saying it actually is taking place all over the country with people that are not connected to each other, that are of all different roles and functions and training and background and everything like that, maybe this is just a very broad ensemble about the entire country. Maybe something like Children of Men would be a good comp. Have you seen that one?
I have. It's been a while. There's yes, in some sense, it is like that. Like you have the protagonist, and he's forced into this task, which essentially he comes across all these different people with all these different agendas. It works very well, yeah.
Okay. Let's look at the pilot. So when his family are threatened, so we normally say his family is threatened. His family members are threatened. Family is singular. So when his family is threatened, a hustler with a head for numbers, great, must track down an aristocrat and convince her to return to her affluent borough before his illegal business is destroyed. So, is it his business or his family that's been threatened? I guess you're saying it's both.
Yeah, first his family's threatened, and then if he doesn't follow through, because he gets hired to do the job inadvertently, basically, but he kind of brushes it off. Mm-hmm. And so then his family's threatened to get his attention, and then if he doesn't follow through with doing the job, they threaten his livelihood, which happens to be illegal businesses.
Isn't that a step down from threatening someone's family, though?
No, not really. Not for him.
So they start by threatening his family, then that doesn't work, so they're like, okay, I guess we'll destroy your business? Something seems off.
No, so initially he's hired for a job and he brushes it off, and so they threaten his family to get his attention, and you find out that the reason that he has all these illegal businesses is essentially to better his family's lot in life. So it's by threatening the businesses, they're also threatening his family's livelihood. And the threat on his family is indirect. It's not like someone pulls a gun out on his parents. It's like the way the mob, would threaten someone. Maybe they leave something to let you know, like, I know where your family lives type of thing. Like do the job or do what I asked you to do, or maybe I come back again and visit your family kind of thing. It's not a direct physical threat to his family. It's more subtle initially.
Okay, but do you still see what I'm getting at, though, is that you start with the high-stakes threat. It's weird to then at the end say, before his business gets destroyed. If you start by saying his family's threatened, then you've set the stakes pretty high. And then from then on, it's weird to downgrade them by the end of the logline. So I would maybe flip them around. When his business is threatened, a hustler with a head for numbers must track down the aristocrat and convince her to return before the gangsters who are threatening him move on to his family. Does that make sense, that that's actually escalating as opposed to de-escalating?
I see how it could be perceived that way, yes.
Okay. Most people value their family more than their business. It's kind of very unusual.
You're right. Most people do.
Okay. It would be very unusual for a character to value money and their business over their family.
Right.
That's just where I'd start with this. So probably flip these around. And then second, what's going to be difficult about convincing a woman to return to her bro? Or is this just going to be he has to just talk to her? Like, what actual challenge is standing in the way?
Yeah, so he does have to convince her because the way that the society is set up, he doesn't have access to just take her back. Like, he needs to use his charm, his manipulation, his intellect, which usually serves him well, but it doesn't really work on her, so he has to figure out how to persuade her to go home because he has no means of just making her do it. Because of the caste in society. There's no way for him to throw her in the back of the car and take her home. Like, he wouldn't be permitted entry into the place. Like, her status is such that he is automatically subservient to her.
Okay,
because of their caste in life.
But so is there more to this than he just goes there and talks to somebody for the whole episode? Like, what else gets in the way? Anything?
No, so the pilot's more like setting up the world building and giving you a glimpse of him, and then the threats that take place, so the interactions, the juxtapositions of these two worlds, and then him meeting her would be like the first half of the pilot. So that would be the setup for it. He does have to talk to her, and again, it's just the juxtaposition of these two worlds. And in meeting, they actually, like, I guess you would say, like a romance sparks. So it's like unexpected romance.
That would sort of seem to make your character's journey easier rather than more difficult, right? I guess it's harder in a certain sense, but it would make it easier to convince someone to go with you.
It would make it easier to convince her to go home if she liked him back, yes. And there's also that juxtaposition of if she goes back, they can't be together because he's not permitted entry into the life that she lives. Because he's in lower, yeah.
Okay. So just if there is any other aspect to the conflict here, then you just want to make it clear how it's not, this is more than just a pilot about a guy sitting in a room talking to a lady, right? So it could be that you need to emphasize there's people after her, right? And they need to avoid them together. She's being pursued or chased. Maybe it's something like if he has to constantly deal with threats against his own family or business. So maybe they're escalating those threats as he takes too long to accomplish his task or something like that.
Right.
So whatever it is, just in terms of whatever challenge is standing, however it's going to escalate, I think is what we would kind of like to see implied in the pilot logline.
Okay.
It's a good setup, though. I mean, I like the world, and I can see how just having to get this lady to come back could take up the entire episode, but if that is the case, we want to know what the conflict is besides just she's like, no, and he's like, but you should, and she's like, but I won't. Like, what external factors besides that are adding pressure to your main character?
Okay.
Hope that's clear. And then, yeah,
yes.
in terms of comps, Sherlock Holmes might not be the right idea exactly either, just because that's a detective procedural where the main character solves a case of the week. Is this a case of the week kind of show?
It kind of is for him. Like I said, once you set him up, you kind of see, like, He's into like racketeering. He does odd jobs. He kind of hustles on the sidelines. And he does like detective work because he does have like a military background. And so he has the ability to kind of work in the shadows, which is set up, it's established early on with his personality and some of the jobs people come and offer him. You get the sense like, okay, he kind of does odd jobs, including detective work.
Yeah, it sounds like he's more of a jack of all trades. So I would maybe look and see if you can find another show that has more of that kind of sense to it, where the character's just kind of scrappy, doing whatever they can to get by. Sometimes they might fight crime here and there, but only because it benefits them, that sort of thing. Whereas Sherlock Holmes is more like the prototypical detective show, right? This is not a traditional detective show. So there may be another comp out there that just fits a little better. I would just stay flexible.
Okay.
Questions?
No, as ever, you're very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so we do have to wrap up because we're 10 minutes over. We do have a couple more that I was not able to get to just in the runtime. So thank you guys so much for sharing those. We will have plenty of opportunities for you to get feedback this upcoming week if you'd like to get more before the next class. But the goal is basically before the end of the next class to have finalized the logline as best you can. We will leave up the upcoming schedule so you guys can see. We will be running next Sunday from 10 to noon, same deal as today. And here are the upcoming bootcamp dates. So this one's going to run for 6 weeks. We also have feature bootcamp that started December 1st. That's ongoing, but not too late to join. Novel bootcamp every Saturday, 12 to 2. And we have Writers Lab Saturdays from 4 to 6 on script camp. All right, thank you so much, guys. We do still have a poll up in the chat. If you're planning to sign up or are not sure or have questions, you can click on those little numbers there to let us know. Nacho, anything else you want to share before we head out today?
Yeah, just table reads is starting in about 2 hours. And then right after table reads, we have Comedy Writers Group. This is a new group that's just started on Sundays.
Great. So here's the upcoming class schedule. We hope to see you guys soon for your next one. And if you're persisting with TV writing, then keep working, keep filling out that sketchbook, refine your logline as much as you can, or you can get feedback on it this week if you need to. If you're a member, you can get one-on-one feedback from me if you just post in the Loglines with Conor channel if you want to. If you just want feedback from anybody, you can just post in feedback. Up to you. But in any case, try to work on that as much as you can before next week and fill out the sketchbook with all the ideas that you have for scenes, characters, locations, moments, endings, things like that. And be ready to pick it up next week. We'll give it a last look if you feel it's not quite ready yet in next week's class, but we want to finish with Loglines by the end of next Sunday. Thank you guys so much. Hope that you got some good stuff out of this class and are excited and ready to move forward with your next pilot. All right, have a great rest of your weekend, guys, and we'll see you soon for your next Script Camp event.